hopefully.
I'll share mine.
I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, March 12th, 2019 meeting of the Edina Park and Recs Commission. Janet, can we have a roll call, please?
Yep. Commissioner Itis? Here. Commissioner McCauley? Here. Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Good?
Here.
Commissioner Darlene?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson? Here. Commissioner Willett?
Here.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Next up, could I have a motion for approval of our meeting agenda, please?
So move.
Second.
All right, we have one change that was suggested just before the meeting tonight, and that's under Section 7, Reports and Recommendations. We're going to pull the election of officers out of the middle and put that up to the front and just get that taken care of up front, and then we'll go through the rest of our reports and recommendations. So that'll be one change in what you have in front of you. Any other comments or changes? Okay, hearing none. With that change, all in favor of the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, next up, approval of meeting minutes for our meeting from back in January. Since our February session was canceled due to weather, I would like a motion to approve our minutes from January 8th, 2019.
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any comments, changes, issues with the minutes from our January meeting? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. So next up, MJ, I believe. We're going to have MJ
Hi,
up.
yes.
We have a little extra visitors in, I understand, right? We've got the Heritage Preservation Commission joining us as well for this portion.
We do. They took a field trip from upstairs down here.
Oh boy, what fun. I miss field trips.
Yeah, but we thought we'd do this at the same time. But thanks for having me. Thank you to the other commission, Heritage Preservation Commission, for being down here today. I'm here to actually show you a really cool new site that the city of Edina has launched, and talk a little bit about some of the strategies behind it and the benefits, and then introduce projects a little bit. So we have been working on having a community engagement strategy within the city using protocols, which you maybe have heard of already. The International Association of Public Participation, is shortened to IAP2, has a spectrum of when you're working on projects, selecting techniques that match the goals and the promise of the project. And so we're kind of working on these protocols and the strategy of what we're doing. We were looking at Speak Up Edina, which you're probably familiar with, and a replacement for that. And then we realized that there were a lot more platforms out there that were a little bit more robust and could offer us more. And I knew going into this strategy or developing this strategy that we were going to need something that had offered more for the community, better ways for us to reach out to individuals and to get input, gather it, and how we actually use it. And so I'm here to introduce our new website called Better Together Edina. So the URL, just so you know, you do have to put the www on the front of it, but it's www.bettertogetheredina.org. So there's benefits for this. There's a plethora of tools that we can use, different ways that we can gather input. It's got a really great reporting system. I actually just pulled some reports for some input that we gathered for the 58th Street Road reconstruction, and it's going to be really helpful for us to basically take that information and turn around and try to come up with solutions that better meet the needs of the individuals and stakeholders that gave us some input. The tool is available online, so it's available to anyone that's anywhere. So even our snowbirds or people who just don't want to come to a public meeting or can't get to a public meeting, they'll have a way to also participate. So we're kind of looking at the site as, it's not an and, it's an or. So if somebody comes to an open house, we are replicating those exact same activities and gathering input the exact same way as we did at the event. And you'll notice that 58th Street is the greatest example. We've made it the farthest with 58th Street because that was our first project to pilot on here. So definitely check that out if you're kind of curious of what that looks like. This site does kind of work with our other site. So what we're doing is, the best way to describe it is our edinamn.gov site has more static things that are always the same. People are visiting it to grab that same permit or to find out the hours of Edinburgh Park, etc. This site is a little bit more moving parts. So things that are happening throughout the city, different ways that we're trying to push information out. But it's a great place, like a one-stop shop for individuals to come. Maybe they come for 58th Street, but maybe they stay for the comp plan and to provide some feedback on the comp plan as well. It's kind of a different way of looking at our engagement rather than putting people into buckets that you're interested in this project and you're interested in this project, that here's all these opportunities and things you can get involved with the city, and you can find about it all right here on this one site. So the projects, I want to show you a couple of them. I mentioned a few of them, but specifically something that the Parks and Recreation Commission should be excited about. It's just a placeholder as of this moment, but there is this tile down here. So each one of these tiles on here is a project. Once you click on the tile, it actually brings you into the project page where there are tools and ways to get involved, ways to ask questions, and then staff actually is responding to the questions and those posts as well. But there's this one tile you will see down here, Fred Richards Playground Design. And this is our placeholder because we have more information coming soon, but this project is being led by Amanda and Tiffany, and if you have more questions about it, I'm sure that Susan has some more information about it as well. But this is just the start of it, of working on a way that we actually already have a whole plan laid out of how we're gonna ask for input and what input we're gonna get and how we're gonna go through that design phase and come to a final decision at the end. But you should definitely go check this out. The way you can help us, go register. So when you get home, jump online and go register and look at all the different things that are happening and tell others about it as well. Share the good news of an awesome site where people can go and get involved. So that's pretty much the site. Are there questions about it? And I told Heritage Preservation Commission that I can come back to your meeting, or they can ask you questions and then we'll funnel them through.
Questions?
So how is it determined what gets put on here?
Pretty much any project is going to be on this site that's happening within the city that has some component of public participation, whether it's inform only all the way up to collaborate.
So not like, I mean, I know there's a reconstruction project on here, but it's not just like regular everyday projects that the different departments are.
No, so not operational projects, but projects where we are collecting information or are informing the community of what's happening. So street projects is a good example. The level of participation on those isn't really inform, it's to push information out and let people know what's going on. But at the same time, it also has the capabilities where people can ask a question. So a person posts a question, then our engineer tech, so on this one is Drew, he can go in and he can answer that question. And other individuals can also pop in there and see the same question asked that they maybe had and see the response to it. It will help us be a little bit more efficient and quicker on our responses, plus hopefully maybe the same information that we put out there to one person, it's consistent throughout every time someone's going to that site and looking at it.
Right.
So it won't live on two places. The information that lives here stays here and it all gets archived here. So the old projects always exist. And then the website itself, you could still go there, but if it's something like the comprehensive plan, it's actually gonna take you to this site. The comprehensive plan is probably one of the best examples of how we're using our current site to get people over here. I should have had Emily man this. Okay. So the comprehensive plan page right here, where basically they click on this or they click on this and it actually takes them over to the Better Together site project page of the comprehensive plan to do the 30-day public review.
Would you plan though to not have that buried so far down into the Gov site? Maybe sit it right on the front page so that people can access
So it
it?
actually is on every page right here. Well, the comprehensive plan is here, but we can change out these bubbles and these actually stay on every page. And then it's in a couple other places. Emily, Emily actually just sent this out to the Planning Commission.
plan button's going to change to a Better Together button once the comprehensive 30-day plan is done. And then I think it's I want to, and then give project feedback, I believe.
Yep.
And then there's one more spot, and it's I want to.
Better Together Edina, sign up. So it's in a couple places, and then what she was saying was that button that says comprehensive plan that actually is on every page, no matter where you go on the edinaeminent.gov, that button will change to Better Together Edina.
After the comprehensive plan is done.
Correct.
Which is
After the 30-day
30-day review.
after the 30-day review, okay.
Yep.
All right, and is it going to be the same logo? Or is it going to be greened up to look like the generic
It'll
stuff?
be that little, I think that same logo potentially. I don't know, the communications department designs those buttons.
Yeah.
It would just, you don't want to make people have to look for it. And it's obviously it's got a logo.
Yep.
And it's got a name, and that's how you want to push it.
Yep.
It sure would be nice to just see that button sitting right somewhere. and not
Leverage
have
the
to go
brand
try
that's
to
been
find it.
developed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's good feedback.
Yeah.
We'll share.
Other questions?
I think that I'm just echoing what Mike already just said, but I think it's important that because there's so many different programs out there with lots of different names around Edina. I actually, when I first saw it, I thought it was something else. So I think just maybe also, again, having the logo of Edina at the top of it, because I thought maybe it was around Edina schools. I understand it's down below, but like all the work we did with all the park signage, it was all around making sure that the logo was exactly the same, and the coloring and the font even. I just think that if you just look at the first screen without scrolling down, I really thought it was a project around the schools. So I just think it might be a good call out.
Thank you.
MJ, the only thought I had is I think most of us would say our experience with a website, the relevance and value is how well it's up to date, how well, things get responded to. How big is the team behind the scenes? How is that being managed as far as keeping up to date on all the content?
Yep, I would say the two main people, so the project leads were Kaylin Idness and myself, and because of my new role as the community engagement coordinator, this is a huge project that's part of mine, and making sure that it's actually rolling out and things are staying up to date. I haven't seen a question go more than 24 hours without being responded to. Because what we're trying to do is to get our experts in there so that when people ask the question, we're not chasing down answers, but that they can go in and they can respond to those questions in a timely way. And so Chad has a team so there's some lead individuals like Emily and other people that are in the departments that are taking the lead on making sure their pages are up to date. And so far it's going really well. They're really embracing it. I'm actually pretty proud of them.
Good. Thanks. Anything else? Nope. Thank you. Appreciate the update. Looks exciting. Okay, next up, community comment. Any community comment this evening? That's right. Instead, they're all leaving. Thank you for joining us. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to reports and recommendations. As we amended in our agenda, first up will be election of officers. We have no new park members for 2019. Often they would be joining us in March, and I think typically elections might be in February, but since we canceled last month's meeting, so we'll have elections of our officers here in March. Two roles, the role of chair and vice chair. So we will open the floor up for each one at a time, first chair and then vice chair. Process will be nomination, voice nomination, and a second. And then once we can close nominations, then vote will be by show of hands. Your packet gave the responsibilities of both of the positions. Not in depth in either role, but some detailed things to get covered. Any questions on the process? If not, with that, I'll open it up for nominations for chair for 2019.
I would like to nominate Greg Good to continue in his role as the chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission. It's been a pleasure to work with him, and his passion and thoroughness in this role is it was a very easy transition from Brenda to Greg, and I'd like to see that continue for this group. So I would like to nominate Greg.
Thank you. Other nominations? Hearing none, I appreciate the nomination and accept the nomination. So all in favor of me serving for a second year? Show of hands. I guess that passes. All right. Second, vice chair. Open the floor for nominations for vice chair. I would certainly be willing to nominate Commissioner Matt Deline for a second year.
Second.
I appreciate Matt's serving this past year, and again, his passion, and especially in particular issues that we need to move forward. So I think he's a good candidate to continue for a second year. Other nominations? All right, we'll close nominations, and having been nominated and seconded, all for Matt serving a second year as vice chair. Any opposed? Okay, passed. Thank you, and thank you, Matt, for serving again for a second year.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Arden Park Construction. Susan?
Yeah, so Laura's here from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and she will provide the construction update at Arden Park. And when Laura finishes, I will give just a brief update on Phase 2 that includes the shelter building.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you so much for having us this evening to give you an update on the construction phase of the Arden Park.
I don't think your volume's on.
Oh, it might not be. Can you hear me? I think it's on now. No?
We can speak up.
Hello?
Hey, thank you. Good evening again, and thank you again for having us this evening to give you an update on the construction phase of the Arden Park Restoration Project. This evening I'd like to cover first the construction process and the work completed up to this date, some successes and challenges that we've faced throughout the construction phase. I'll talk about some next steps to kind of complete the phase 1 of the construction phase, and then Susan will cover the phase 2 work. First, I'll touch on demolition removals. I'm sure you're all familiar with this site, or we're familiar with the old shelter building that was demolished. That was one of the first pieces of work that our contractor, Rachel Contracting, took on. The building came down in about 15 minutes. It was pretty fast process. And from there, we moved on to tree removals and buckthorn removal throughout the park. This is something that was pretty heavily discussed within the community and the Park Commission and City Council as well. Some feedback that we've heard from the community since the tree removal has taken place is that people are happy to see that there's still a lot of trees left on site, and that they're happy to see that the buckthorn is out of there too. The woods, especially on the west side of the park, was pretty inundated with buckthorn, so I think people are happy to be able to see the nice trees that are remaining, and also to get a view of the creek as well. So we've had some good feedback on that. After the tree removal was complete, we undertook the removal of the low-head dam that is in the creek, or was in the creek, just north of 54th Street. That took place next. In a pretty smooth process there. We were kind of unsure about the material that was underneath the low-head dam. It ended up being sort of a concrete cap with some limestone chunks underneath, so that went pretty swiftly. And then followed that with the removal of the concrete underlayment underneath 54th Street Bridge. That was part of several different phases of the construction of 54th Street. That was a little bit more of a challenging process in terms of access, getting equipment underneath the bridge to take out that concrete underlayment, but that's now removed as well. And next, after the removals and demolition, our contractor moved on to dewatering the creek. The contractor has done dewatering in 3 separate phases, essentially. Working from north to south, the contractor put in some sheet pile at the far north extent of the project, and then set a pump in, and then has dewatered in 3 separate sections of the creek, so they've been able to do the creek channel work as well. Next, the contractor took on the large wood installation. This was wood that was salvaged from trees removed as part of the creek restoration. Essentially, the wood is inserted into the bank. Long pieces of wood are inserted into the bank, and then those pieces of wood are held in place kind of by pins by vertical wood structures. So this is the process of putting the wood into the bank itself, and then the backfilling around the large pieces of wood. Essentially, those pieces of wood will help reinforce the bank over time. They also serve to deflect boaters as they come along a bend, and sometimes folks who are less apt to paddle may hit the bank, and so this protects the bank a little bit and then deflects them back out into the middle of the channel. Next, our contractor took on excavation of the channel itself and the fabric encapsulated soil lifts. This was the first section that was excavated. It's a large pool that's sort of right in the middle of the stream, working north to south. You can see those large wood installations off to the left-hand side there, the east side of the park. Those have now been cut down to match the grade of the bank of the park. This channel will sort of serve as a big pool for smaller fish to kind of congregate and be a nice fishing spot when the park is complete. We've taken 2 different drone flights of the park during construction. One actually right at the beginning of construction when our contractor was just getting set up. This drone flight was on February 14th, and we'll do another drone flight when we get to the end of the first phase of construction, so that we have kind of some progress photos and some good imagery of kind of how the park has progressed over time. As I mentioned, when the channel was starting to be excavated, then right behind that we did the construction of the fabric encapsulated soil lifts, or FES lifts. This is what will become the stream bank over time. It looks pretty highly engineered now. If you are by the park and you see kind of rolls of coconut fiber blanket on the stream bank over time, because those soil lifts, the fabric lifts are actually filled with soil and seed and some small rock. That seed will germinate and plants will grow through that coconut fiber. The banks will be vegetated. We're also going to be planting some trees and shrubs and some just potted plants into the banks as well. So that'll become vegetated over time. And that coconut fiber will sort of degrade and become part of the stream bank. It's that process. This is again from that February 14th drone flight, where we were able to capture the contractor building the fabric encapsulated soil lifts, and then placing the stakes in place to hold those in place over time. That's kind of the finished product there. After the stream bank was built, then the contractor worked on placing rock riffles and boulders in the stream. These serve a number of different purposes. They'll create sort of an interesting paddling condition. We'll have water kind of rolling over rocks, so we'll get a little bit of a rapid condition. In higher water, in lower water, then boaters will just navigate around them. They're kind of placed at kind of offset areas so that boats can navigate around them. They also create a nice pool behind them, so smaller fish will kind of congregate behind those big rocks and be a food source for larger fish to help boost the fishery in the creek itself. And most recently been working on installing the helical piers and bridge abutments for the 2 pedestrian bridges and the boardwalk in the park. This is a photo just from yesterday, the helical piers where the kind of main arterial bridge on the southern end of the park. So right behind me from this photo is the hockey rink. So then you're looking towards where the new shelter building will be. A little touch on some successes we've had with the project. We've had excellent progress. We've actually had a really good construction season. Wintertime can be pretty challenging for getting construction projects in, but we've had really good contractor, great project team, and we've had good frozen ground conditions, which makes for good earth-moving time. And we're also ahead of the proposed schedule. The contractor assumed that they'd be working right through March, and we're kind of wrapping up things that they thought they'd be doing kind of later in the month, so we're definitely feeling good about that. We've been able to come in under budget on a number of items. There's still a lot of work to go. That certainly could change, but we're doing really well on budget up to this point, which we feel really good about. You may have heard also that there were some contacts by residents to OSHA, some concerns about safety on site. We had a very positive visit with OSHA when they came out, didn't find any issues with safety at all, and actually determined that a concern that was raised by a resident was actually associated with a different company not working on the park project at all. Some challenges. Weather has been a little bit of a challenge. We've had some very cold spells, and now we're kind of getting into the time where snow is melting, we're getting some rain. But we've been really proactive with our contractor, making sure that the site is really buttoned up before we get some flow in the creek. They've been very responsive to making sure that the erosion control materials are in place, and we feel good about that. We've had a number of utility conflicts on the site. Most notably, there's a fiber optic line that ran underneath the Lowhead Dam. When that started to be excavated, we determined that that utility line was not quite as deeply buried as we thought it was. So the contractor had to be very careful with excavating that. They had a utility locator on site while we were doing that work, and all is well. No issues there. It's a photo of where the utilities were. And then I can give you a little bit of a kind of forecast about what to look for in the next 8 to 9 weeks. Once the contractor works through this next phase where they're installing the bridge abutments and getting prepped for installing the bridge and boardwalk, they're going to be off-site for about 5 weeks. They won't be able to do any creek work because of a restriction by the DNR over fish spawning. So they'll be off-site for a good chunk of April and then into the first week of May. However, they will be able to respond if we do have high water conditions and have ice jams, that sort of thing. They'll be able to get on site and help us remediate those issues. And then once the contractor gets back on site in early May, they'll be starting to work on the trails, the paths, and the creek accesses. That'll be kind of the first thing that they work on when they get back on site. And then that will be followed by installation, construction of the multi-phase stormwater system, which includes the pretreatment structure and the stormwater swales, as well as the trails construction as well, and the creek access points. And then Susan will touch on kind of what to expect in the phase 2.
So as a reminder, this was the final design that was selected. So at the February 5th City Council meeting, Council awarded the bid to the construction of the shelter building to American Liberty Construction. We had a real competitive bid process. We received 8 bids. What was included in the base bid was the park shelter, the related utilities, security camera and card access, and then we had a bid alternate that included the trail and rink lighting. So I just wanted to kind of show our funding source for the project, and then where, and this is the city's portion of the costs come into play for bid package 1, and then the bid package 2, which was the shelter and the trail and rink lights. The playground will be going to council the first meeting in April. For that request for purchase for the playground, but that is the amount of the playground, the $120,000. So as of right now, we do have a contingency on phase 2 of the project, and we feel good about that, a little over $200,000. And this is just kind of an overview of the overall project timeline. So we will be getting started on the construction of the shelter building, probably the beginning to middle of May. We have on this coming Monday, we have a kind of a construction coordination meeting with the teams that are working on phase 1, and then our general contractor and the architect that's working on the shelter building. So we'll have a kickoff meeting on Monday, and that's where we'll put together more of a concrete project schedule. But still planning on wrapping up the project by the end of this year. So with that, any questions for myself or for Laura?
Questions from the commission? Matt?
Yeah, I have a couple. More curious. You said we're ahead of schedule. Have you changed the ETA of when we'll be done or not?
Thanks for the question, Matt. We anticipate the contractor being complete with sort of the first phase of work so major construction work by the end of May, and then the vegetation will be planted throughout the month of June. They need to be finished by July 1st. They still have that set deadline of July 1st, but they are working ahead of schedule currently.
Got it. And then these are more curious. So you showed those large wood those large wood embankments. Do those decompose over time?
They do. They are expected to decompose over time. Some of that will stay in the bank and decompose and break down. The structures that kind of are outward facing, the kind of big root wads, those will somewhat break down, but still kind of maintain some structure so that erosive flow doesn't kind of further erode the bank. There's some breaking down and some softening, but the structure will still be in place.
And then the only other one that I had, again, curious, but also I think there's been some public question about the buckthorn and then how the long-term abatement of that growing back. Has that started, and or what is it that you'll be doing if it hasn't that will then, because I think there was you couldn't do stuff right now because of the soil needed to be hold for the big machines and stuff like that. So when will that start and what will be the process?
Sure. So the contractor, when they came in and did the initial buckthorn removal, they treated the stumps with a little bit of herbicide to prevent resprout. It's an oil-based herbicide that is just applied to the cut stump itself that is pulled down into the roots, and then the stump won't resprout. They do their very best to make sure they're hitting every stump, but there's a lot of buckthorn out there. And so they are also under contract to come back this fall and do what they call a resprout treatment. So any stumps that have resprouted, or if there are berries in the soil and those seeds resprout, then once everything has entered dormancy in the fall, then they'll come back in with a foliar herbicide, so something that treats the leaves, and do a spray of just those resprouts, so we're making sure that we're eliminating the buckthorn. Sure.
Other questions?
One question, maybe I missed it. Is the water being pumped around?
That's correct. So there has been 3 different stages of dewatering. When the contractor was working on the north of the project, we had the pump the very far north end of the project. Currently, the contractor has been working sort of in that last third, and so the pump is currently working to bring water essentially from kind of the middle of the Minnehaha block down past the 54th Street Bridge. So you'll see there's a big 6-inch pipe that runs along the eastern side of the project that's moving water down into the creek past 54th Street.
Okay, and then when do you expect to stop that and let the creek start flowing?
We'll need to be out of the creek by this Friday. The DNR requires us to be out of doing any creek work by the 15th, and so the contractor will have their pump removed and the piping out and all of that work buttoned up this week.
Okay.
The rain we get the next couple days might reestablish the creek for you on its own, right?
That's right, it will, yeah. We've been doing some modeling, we're expecting some flows in the creek based on the rain and the snow melt and temperatures and all of that. So
Yep.
yeah, it's good timing for us to be finishing that up, for sure.
Couple questions for you, Laura. One, you mentioned the drone flights
Yes.
and the video from that. Is that something that is available to the public on your site, on the city site in some fashion?
We've been sharing with city staff, so there's some interagency sharing, but as of now, we're just using it for kind of social media and park updates and updates to our board. So no, not available to the public, except just in using for social media.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
And you mentioned interaction with the local residents. I think your words were some good feedback. Share with us some of the feedback that hasn't been so good outside of the OSHA site incident that you mentioned.
Sure. We've had some feedback from some area residents about some vibrations. And we've kind of reached out to those folks individually. They've just been right around the park boundaries. No specific damage or anything like that, but folks that are concerned about the damage to their foundations and things like that. So we've been just working with those folks individually, kind of figuring out what is causing the vibrations, and just kind of staying in touch with those folks. I think generally it's more of a feeling, not a specific damage. So I think, now that people are prepared for kind of what is happening and now that work is pretty much complete, I think people are feeling better about the noise levels as well. Noise levels have also been a concern, the beeping on construction vehicles and things like that. I think it'll be nice for folks to have a month off where the construction vehicles won't be on site so much. And that large work of moving soil and moving rock and things like that, those things are complete. So that's been a concern too. And otherwise, now that the tree removal is complete and people can see, that's been a big concern, but now that it's complete, I think people feel more comfortable with that as well.
So the view that we have now is the least amount of trees that it's going to have, right?
That's correct.
And then eventually we'll do some planting and things will start to come back.
Right,
but-
I think the ratio is 4-to-1 replanting. Certainly the trees that we're replanting are not going to be quite the size that we took out, but yeah, we're planting quite a few trees in place. Yes.
Good. Any other last questions? Go ahead.
I actually have two, kind of backwards on from MJ being here. I didn't see anything on this particular project on that Better Together website. Is there going to be any updates on that? Because I think that from a drone perspective or something like that, I think if we're trying to get people to go to that, I didn't know if that was on there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't think that we'll be using Better Together Edina because we've already received all of the feedback through public participation with the Arden Park project. As far as updates, we'll be using the Watershed District updates on their website, and we do too on our project site.
Yep.
There's a
Okay.
Arden Park project.
So the Better Together is more for potential or upcoming projects before, not in the ACT projects.
Yeah, it's when we are seeking feedback and input on projects as in the planning stages, or
Not
pre-planning stages.
Not that people who give feedback all through it. Just kidding. I'm kidding. My last one was in terms of that communication and feedback that are constantly wanting to be. Are we making sure people understand why we aren't there for 5 weeks, so they don't just think that we just ran out of money or forgot to work or something like that? Because I can see that coming up.
It's a good question. And yes, we'll be sending out a project update this coming Friday that will explain sort of where we are in construction right now, that we're about halfway through kind of the phase 1, what to expect over the next month, and then once May comes. So yes, people will be informed on that.
So I'm curious about that communication plan. Is that going to just the residents in the Arden Park neighborhood, or is that going to general Edina population? Is it if you've signed up for an email, or is it we're going to try and communicate with every household we can? If you don't have an email, then we go to direct mail, whatever that may be.
Good question. So a few different avenues there. Both, as Susan mentioned, both the city and the Watershed District have project pages that have kind of that general information and updates. You can sign up to get an email about those project updates, so those go directly to folks' email addresses. And then we also have been reaching out just to the Arden Park neighborhood, so they're getting that information as well. And then if folks don't have either email or use the website, then they can. Our contact information is on just about every piece of media that we put out, and so people will call us directly and get that information.
Final call. Any questions? If not, thank you, Laura. Thank you for your work and the good project update. We appreciate it. Susan, thank you as well. Susan, we'll turn it over to you again for introduction to our next section, park signage and wayfinding.
Yes, thank you. So staff have kind of been referring to this as our phase 2 or our internal park signage replacement project. The scope includes a signage assessment, signage concepts, design intent, and then recommended materials for the wayfinding and park regulation signs. Tonight we're asking the commission to provide feedback on 2 design options that we will show you tonight. We are hoping to use your feedback so we can narrow the design options to 1, and then we can continue to kind of tweak that design until we're pleased with the final designs. So I would like to introduce Terry Quant from RSP Dreambox. Terry may look familiar to the commission. Terry and her team worked on the Parks, Recreation, and Trails Strategic Plan. They've also worked locally with Dakota County, the City of Brooklyn Park, and the Tamarack Nature Center on various signage projects. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Terry.
Thank you, Susan. and thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to share what we've come up with for the design of the new signage for the park system. As you can see on your, I think you have monitors in there, is that? Okay, good. I was making an assumption. The idea of this wayfinding really is to create a welcome for people when they come to Edina Parks. And so we took a really interesting approach in assessing what you have, the tone of voice that it has. We wanted to create alignment on the team and work closely with the stakeholders to understand, what are some of the desirable characteristics for the signage system. I'm just going to rewind a little bit and share with you our process and what we've been doing for the last couple of months. We waited until the weather got cold to do all of the signage assessments. We did our discovery work primarily in December, but a little bit in January as well. And our process is pretty clear. We did a dream session with the stakeholders to determine the direction, the design direction of the signage. And setting experiential criteria. One of the things that I didn't mention is that my team, Dreambox, really is invested in doing experience design. And what that means is that we're thinking about how people process information, both emotionally and rationally, when they're getting information from signage and messaging and storytelling on sites. The concepts, what you're seeing here, everything that's in gray has been completed. And what we're looking for tonight is, as Susan mentioned, some direction to focus our energies for the remainder of the project, which design selection. And we have been starting to talk with signage vendors too, to be able to bring this to the next stage. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the next stage is once we've had a chance to see the signs. So I'm going to go to the next one. We visited 16 parks total in the Edina Park system and one in St. Louis Park, accidentally, which has the same name as one of your parks. But we went out to all the different sites. We really looked at it through the lens of what type of signs exist and what are really needed on each site. So identification is really the park name and the address, and you already have those. So those have all been fully implemented. Vehicular wayfinding really gives people in cars, in vehicles, in buses, in vans, in school, et cetera, some idea of where they can be and where they can't be, if there's any directionality. And then also there's pedestrian wayfinding. We would also include in that trail markers and maps and maybe information that we want to share on site. Regulatory signs have a lot of different purposes. Some of them are behavioral, so it's like the rules of the, how to engage in the site, but also hours. And for a dog park, for example, who can use what, where, when, how. And the stakeholders really had a lot of great feedback for us. We reviewed, I do have some artifacts here too, of our original signage assessment, which has a lot of images of the different signs that we came across in your parks. And I'll give you a little bit of a sample here. So one of the things we wanted to do was figure out what was consistent and what wasn't. We wanted to understand what types of signs exist, what is needed on the site. And as I like to say in the world of signage and wayfinding, one of our first tasks oftentimes is to do subtractive gardening or take a look and see if what we're saying really needs to be said on the site. So you're going to see where we landed with the design on these, but the color and the design and the language and the tone we were really thinking about. The language was different from site to site. As you can see, the color for some signs was also different from site to site, depending on, and regulatory might end up being the same color as an adoption sign. So those kinds of things are the types of things we were really taking a look at and critiquing and also assessing for what is being said and what needs to be said. I'm going to stop for just a second, actually, and give you a chance to respond. If I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you here. So, are there any questions so far or comments?
I don't know if there's a question or a comment. in your selective gardening process, and maybe you're going to get to this somewhere else in the presentation, but is there a desire or is there an attempt, or what are you presenting to kind of streamline these or make there some consistency? Because I mean, there's some that are green, some are brown, some are white, some have some font, some have a different font. It just feels like there's,
Yes.
it almost feels like when I try to get my 5-year-old dressed in the morning, there's about 6 different messages coming out of my mouth, and he doesn't listen to any of them. So that would feel like this right here if I walked into some of these parks. Yeah, this is me right here, right? So I'm just wondering if that, maybe you'll talk about it later.
No, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up in this current context. I think, there is a lot of language, and actually sometimes in the situation where people are coming into a park, they just want to know what they need to know at that moment, and it's sort of just-in-time communication and just enough. So to your point, we've pared back significantly the language, and also made a recommendation that some regulatory information is something that's handed out to people if they're getting, for example, a dog license for the parks, so we don't have to post all of the rules and regulations on site. And also that on the website there can be a support for the rules and regulations and hours of the parks, so that we can make sure that all of that is consistent and people can have one place to go for all of the information. So that is one of our recommendations.
And maybe building off of Matt's question, is part of the assessment also looking at some of these and saying, there's probably no real reason for that sign, we can just get rid of it? Or do you also bring an opinion of you're missing some certain things and we ought to be adding certain messages in different parks?
We only found one that was missing,
Okay.
and it actually was welcome. Just saying welcome. There's a name of a park, but it doesn't say that. And so you'll see in our sign package that that's one that we added, but mostly we subtracted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the direction that we got from the team was to build from the monument sign design, and what I mean by that is to actually use that as a precedent and make sure that we're staying consistent with that, because now that's implemented, we want to make sure that we're kind of speaking the same material language as we design these signs. And so you're going to see 2 options that reference back to the monument signs, and create a positive experiential quality. A lot of this has to do with how we language things. When we say something like welcome, you're welcome here, we're glad you're here. I mean, so those are the kinds of tones that we wanted to have, and not be sort of heavy-handed, if you will, on the restriction side of the equation, if you will. We wanted to use a natural and legible palette, so these things were easy to read. The very best legibility is when you actually reverse type out of a dark ground. So you're going to see that look and approach as well. And of course employ sturdy and sustainable materials. And so while we're building from the monument design, we are also deploying some different materials that will be very durable at a different scale of sign that we're now starting to look at. We asked the entire team, what are the characteristics of the Edina parks, and what kind of emotional tone should they set? And what I didn't show you here is how many times each one of these words came up, but I think 4 people said relaxing and 3 people said peaceful. And so we summarized these comments that we got from the team to mean natural, vibrant, and welcoming. And so that's been our sort of North Star on the project from a design perspective, experientially. Now I'm going to walk you through the draft document, and you'll see the different approaches that we are providing to you for the signage design.
Sorry, Terry, can I interrupt with one question? You've mentioned a couple times your stakeholders. Can you tell us a little bit about who those stakeholders were that you were getting this insight from?
Yes, and I realized I didn't bring in a list of names. Susan, can you help me with that?
Yeah, it was staff.
Staff.
Staff made up from our communications department. We had our graphic designer involved, and then 2 other members from our communications team. We had park maintenance, Tom Swenson, Brian Dristy from our park maintenance division, and then myself, Tiffany Bushelin, and Amanda Clark from the Parks and Recreation department.
Okay, thanks.
And part of our inquiry there too is to really understand, for example, on park maintenance side, how these things are actually implemented, how we actually put them in the ground, how we make sure that they're protected once they are actually installed. So they provided some really invaluable feedback to us. The first thing that we did was we studied typography. The city of Edina has a brand, and you have brand typography, and we use that as the first part of our exploration, but it's actually the one that you're seeing right here. It's not typically used for signage, but we wanted to try it on and see if it would work. What we wanted to do was have something bold, a little bit more condensed, and a lot more legible from a distance, so we'd be able to increase the size of the type. So our preferred typography is DIN Bold. It's an internationally recognized font for signage. The preferred shape and symbol concept came from originally the monument signs have a curved or radiused edge on two corners of the signs, and so we wanted to actually take a look at that and say, do we want to do that on other signs in the package? And we realized that it wasn't really adding anything. It was kind of calling attention to itself, actually, and the size of the signs that are smaller. And so we recommended that we move forward with a square or a rectilinear shape for most of the signs. The team approved the icon and no text approach as the preferred way to communicate no parking or no vehicle. So both of those things could be read from that sign. This is a really important decision right here, and, and we had some interesting discussion about it. The dog park symbols, we decided to develop symbols or identify dogs as large and small for the two different sizes of dog park, rather than say only through text, small dog park or large dog park. The large dog is kind of in the retriever zone, from a icon perspective. There actually was not a golden doodle, although I know that is the branded dog of Edina. And the one on the right is a small, like Boston Terrier. It's really just indicating, in this case, that we're trying to say there are big dogs and small dogs. We're not going to put a size chart, out in the parks, but we're going to, let people self-select and make sure that the right size dog ends up in the right area.
Can we just jump in right now?
Yeah, sure.
Does it make sense to be completely transparent with the public and just put like a weight limit and just have it typed so big dog is defined as 40 pounds, or I don't know what the number is, but just arbitrarily like 40 pounds and over, and small dogs 40 pounds or less, as opposed to I fear that people might get real literal, and it leaves a little bit of wiggle room, between, well, I have a mini golden doodle, so.
Right. Pardon?
I was going to ask the same question as Matt, but also, is it a golden retriever puppy versus, I think that, because people do, I think that, and I don't know if there's really anybody policing which size dog is there, and they're not scaling them, obviously, but, I think that, my little dog thinks she's a big dog, so, so I just think that, I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it leaves a lot for interpretation, right? So it depends on what you think about your breed of dog. Mm-hmm. We have a 15-pound dog, and I think that's a big dog because she's overweight, but my wife thinks she's tiny. So I just think, is there a way we can just kind of define that for the public and, whatever,
Well,
and
we certainly could put on some language. I think what we're trying to do, and you'll see through this package, that we're really trying to keep things as clean as possible and not add a lot of extra language. If 40 pounds is the limit, and my dog is 85 pounds, and I'm real clear about, which way he goes. But, and I think this is one of the reasons why, even though this wasn't preferred by the team, the paw size was one of the other ways to kind of indicate that without actually indicating any kind of breed. The reason that we did the breed was because it had a little humor to it, quite honestly. It was meaning to be kind of referencing a larger type of dog, and more just for fun. There's an aspect of, again, this is welcoming, and we're not, kind of, and maybe it really does need to be weight I'll say, weight determined. So that's a decision that, I defer to you on in terms of what you want to do with, how you want to communicate that to
and
the visitors.
I don't know, and I know that I'm anticipating every time you put these signs up, you're creating new behavior. People are going to have to understand that. So we're probably just, it's the beginning of that curve, right? And then people just understand what it is. And, it's the things that people go into the Go Edina app and talk about what they saw or what they experienced. So I'm just trying to figure out ways to kind of lessen that time frame. And, I can appreciate the humor for sure in this. I just, I know that, there's a segment of the population that maybe if it's just real clearly defined, it doesn't allow for any interpretation, and then we avoid some of that feedback.
So one of the ways that we were planning on communicating all the rules and regulations for the dog park, and any specific information about weight limits, for example, would be included in that, is that we understood that everyone who uses the dog park has to have a leash, a collar, that is purchased from the city of Edina in order to go, and that people don't always have their dogs wearing the collar when they are in the dog park. However, they are expected to do that and buy, their license from the city. So what we had discussed was the possibility is when they get their license and when they get the collar for their dog, that all of the detailed information on the registration and behaviors that would be expected in the park would be handed to them as a part of their registration process, rather than having all of those things on site. So going back to one of your earlier questions about, are we subtracting the number of signs, dealing with a particular topic, these are the three that we're talking about with regard to dog behavior and human behavior with regard to dogs. So, only small dogs in this area, only large dogs, and then also please leash and pick up after your dog. And that's, stated in a different way now than it had been before. But those are the three that we're really proposing would be not only at the dog site, but would also be perhaps in other parks if you want to position a leash and pickup sign there. So I don't know if that meets, would address your concerns about.
No, and I don't mean to get too far in the weeds specific around these dog park signs. It was just a thought. And the only other thought I have, maybe you'll have about this is that to back up your point of, people going for a license and they get handed a packet of materials and, those are our most effective, defenders of the park license, the rules and stuff like that. And I appreciate those folks, but I do know that going through in my corporate life, one of the things for these signs is there's an opportunity potentially to put the URL for the Edina website on there so that people can then, everyone has I shouldn't say everyone, most people have a smartphone, and then that's a way that people can quickly reference and get to those things. I don't know if that's an opportunity here as well, or throughout the rest of the. And again, I don't want to clutter the things. I want them to be uniform and pretty straightforward, and this is what we expect. But it's just an idea. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. You had, you're going to see these things as we go through here. We decided to refer everyone to the website to get all of the rules for the parks. To your point, I think that is a much cleaner approach. And, there is another way that we can do that with a QR code, so you can just go up and we also know that not everybody necessarily carries their phones when they're going out to a park or, but to know that they can go to the website for the city and get that information is, I think, really important. So I'm going to continue walking through here so you can see the two different kinds of signs. This is the first option. And we added this welcome sign. We realized that we weren't saying that to people, and we're creating an opportunity to give them some more information about perhaps what some of the park activities are. We are in the process of refining what icon type of approach that we would take. We leaned away from showing any human figures and rather showing icons of maybe a sport ball or a type of item that you might use, like ice skates, for example. as icons, but we're still in the process of that and would love to hear your thoughts about it. I'm going to see if I can also.
So that sign that you have the little hand over the welcome, this isn't, is this in addition to the park signs that are already out there?
Yes, and it's a different size. It's smaller.
Is there any way to add to like the bottom of the existing sign that we just put in? To like on our current
Yeah,
sign?
so these signs are not intended to be like main entrance signs. So we're anticipating putting these signs near shelter buildings, near areas where we see most of the activity. That was at least what we discussed in our meetings.
One of the things we noticed when we were on some of the sites is there would be a monument sign at a corner. But if you come in a different way to a park, you're not necessarily going to see that monument sign depending on how you enter. And so there were opportunities, for example, even by like a playground, for example, where people might be coming directly to a playground, but they may not have passed by the primary monument sign. So this one is kind of drilling down to the next level of information that people may want to have, which is our park is open, these hours. The park rules are posted on our website, and please leash and pick up after your pet. So we're keeping that kind of a consistent message there, but also naming the park. So we have the City of Edina name, the park name, and the City of Edina, and then some icons perhaps, on the sign if there are multiple activities that people can engage in. And this one most closely replicates the style of the let's see, I've got to zoom back out here. As you can see, it really is very close to the monument sign in style. It is a different material, however, because now that we're going down to a smaller size post, we want it to be durable and long-lasting. And what we'd like to do is propose that it's made out of steel or aluminum, and it's powder coated. So it's a steel that is made to look like the naturally weathered look of the cedar that's on the monument signs. So we're matching colors, but we're not matching materials. And that way, when we're actually using some of the signs that have a much taller and thinner post, that substrate can be still structurally sound. We would not be able to make a post out of wood that would really last at this scale. So, except for perhaps maybe a trail marker, if we decided to go with a nice substantive 6-inch square cedar post as one of the ways of communicating that.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Are you going to, within these signs, are you going to show us where you think that they should be placed? I guess my biggest frustration, or I'm trying not to say frustration, but I was on the project with all the signs, and we went through and made sure we changed where the placements were and all the locations to be in a better place. So it feels like we're saying that project didn't go as well, that we haven't we're gonna go back and put them in the places they should have been already. When we just did this huge project on the signs in the first place, we changed a lot of the locations for the signs from where they were before. And so now I'm just curious, like, besides what the signs look like, but where we're going to place them, because what we tried really hard on that project was to make sure that they did look more natural, that they did had the wood feel to it, that it didn't feel like sign central. And that's my biggest concern, is we're adding a lot of signs that may feel very signage. And I think that that's really and it may just be because it looks so big on the page, but that's what I really want to understand is, I know these signs do exist today in there, but where are we going to put them at? The welcome sign particularly, in terms of how that looks.
Yeah, I appreciate your concerns. And the welcome sign would replace the welcome sign. And the dog park signs would replace the dog park signs. And we'd end up with less signs at the dog park, for example, than we currently have.
I thought we didn't have a welcome sign now.
The welcome sign is the only sign we've added to this.
Oh, I think you said the welcome sign would replace the welcome sign. And
The welcome sign is the only sign that we added to the mix of the types of signs that you currently have in your park in terms of there are opportunities to welcome guests, especially in extremely large parks at different points. It's not trying to replace the monument signs. The monument signs are doing a great job of noting and allowing people to identify where they are when they actually are navigating to your site. The welcome sign has an opportunity, and not necessarily in all parks. Some of the parks are too small for a welcome sign, quite frankly. But some of them might have a benefit of having this welcome sign as a part of the signage system. So I wouldn't over-deploy them. That is absolutely the last thing I would want to do here. I think, if anything, most of the signs, what you're seeing in the original signage assessment, we're recommending all of those go away. This is not adding to without taking away. These are replacing, and with a recommendation to actually remove a lot of the instruction signs about how you behave on the site or where you park. So you'd have like this consistent package, and it shows up the same in every one of the Edina parks. That was really the intent, was consistency.
And can I just add, so we are right now really focused on the design. We haven't talked about where the signs will be placed. We're just not quite there yet in the project. And I'd just like to add the welcome sign. It's more of showing with the icons what each park has to offer. So that was kind of the intent on adding that sign. It was not to replace or to replicate the main entrance, the monument signs. It was to show people, as Terry mentioned, if people are coming into a park a different way, to see that we have fields, we have some of the different icons, whatever we would have at that park. That was the intent.
Fishing or swimming, for example.
Yeah. And if the commission doesn't feel that we need that, then that's what we would like to hear. What we'd like to hear from you tonight. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. We don't have to sit on this point for a long time. I can understand where this would maybe feel there'd be some redundancy in some of the parks to have welcome signs in it. I could also understand if I was sitting or walking through Braemar with the new Braemar, plan that they're putting together and having some of these things in other places where I understand they're a case by case. I think maybe as we go through this, it'd be interesting to see where you guys are proposing to have the welcome signs as opposed to, because I know from the example you're using from Van Valkenburg, there's one way in that park, and I don't necessarily know if a welcome sign is necessarily needed. The wayfinding to tell you that this is where the dog park is, this is where the softball fields are, this might be the trail that they put around it, that would make sense to me, but having an additional welcome sign might feel a little redundant. So maybe it'd be helpful if, as you guys go further in the project, to understand we think welcome signs are needed. Might make sense at Roslyn, might make sense at Edinburgh, might make sense at Braemar, whatever that may be. So
definitely the larger parks where people have different points of entry, or they're going to get out of their car at a different point. I think that's that for sure. Roslyn has a lot of different points of entry, and it's really interesting. I mean, you could be coming on a bike over a path, over 62 and entering the park. So what we thought was that, for the larger parks, we certainly don't need them in the small ones. I mean, that's really clear. They're signed on corners, they are established as an identifier for the place, and that works. What we're saying is that there might be other places where people are getting, they'd like to have a little more information. We do need a place to post the information about going to the website. So whether or not we have a welcome sign, what we had decided as a group was that we were going to post a sign that included information about how people could get further rules and regs for the park. And I'm going to go back to this one. I know it's very hard to read at this scale, that's why I was trying to blow it up. It's really the hours. It's getting them to the website for rules, and it's also please leash and pick up. And if we're doing that with another sign that is individual, then that one's taken care of. But we thought with all of the other behavioral rules that we were seeing posted around the parks, we wanted to drive people back to the website. So we do need a sign somewhere to communicate that. Could it be smaller than this? Sure, it could be.
Yeah, I'll just give you an example of where we might need something like that. It's the Highlands Park by my house, where the sign is at the south end of the park, and the playground and the rink and the parking lot are at the north end of the park. So something like that might work there, where everything is just disjointed, because the big soccer fields are right there where the monument sign is. So I could see where something like that might help at that particular park. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified that it depends on what the park looks like, and we haven't decided on placement yet, because at first I was like, we don't need that in every park.
Right.
But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Terry, one further question on this one. Was it discussed and an intentional decision not to have the city emblem on the welcome signs?
Yes. We decided not, we did put it on this one.
Right. I noticed
as an
that was
option.
on one. Yep.
Right.
Okay.
I like the tall one on the far right. Is there a way you could, I don't know if it's two-sided or a triangular, but could that be like a welcome? So like, for example, on the Highlands Park, it says right on the corner of Interlochen and Mirror Lakes, there's a sign there, and the park's kind of like hidden back in there. But like, well, it's for the tennis courts, but it's like, and then there's like, people think you can walk back there, but it's actually like swamped. You can't. I've tried biking, it doesn't work. But I mean, it's something like those tall signs could be a really good, you know, I mean, if it's three-sided, if it could say welcome or a URL or something on an opposite side, I don't know if that would be something that would be, because I feel like I see those all the time in Minneapolis parks and other places that for directions, as well as, like, I think it's great how it says, like, it's 2.1 or 2.5 mile trail or whatever the case may be. I think if it has multiple sides, it could be a way of having less signs, but including more information. I don't know.
I think usually trail signs have the directionality that where it serves the user. So if it's at an intersection and there are three sides visible, then you usually use three sides for information about the trail. So I would be hesitant to do that because it also has that kind of like trail sign look to it. So people are looking to it for that type of information. It's something that's marking your way. It's kind of a cairn, if you will. It doesn't mean that that information couldn't go on to something else in the park. One of the things that we have not addressed in this package yet is how to address the identification of the park buildings. And this is one of the reasons, honestly, that we came up with a welcome sign, because sometimes when you come into a park, and if you're not familiar with your parks, as I was not, I see a building, but it's not marked and it has no information on it. So there's two things that could happen there. One is it could have identification on the building itself, so that it says the name of the park on it. So you, first of all, know that that building is a part of the park and you're welcome to be there, right? Because that's the whole point, is to really share that information with people so they know that they're welcome to go up to that building. Like the one where Cornelia is located, for example, I didn't know if that was really part of the school or if it was part of the park, because there wasn't information on the door or on the building. So what we were thinking is that we would address some of that informational requirement to identify the building right on the door itself, because that would be probably the least expensive and the most efficient way to go about it, is to put an Edina logo, the name of the park, and your hours directly on the glass, and then people know as soon as they approach the building, okay, I'm supposed to be here, I can come here these hours of the day. It may not be the hours that the building is open, but at least they know that the park is open during those hours. So that's another way to do that. You're just seeing some extra other signs that we were asked to generate for some of the ball fields. Please don't use the fence for batting practice. Right now it says please don't, or it doesn't say please at all. It just says don't hit balls against fenced. And so we wanted to just like make all of the language consistent. Everything says please. It's just polite, you know. And also, you know, numbering for the fields so that you'd be able to see them and read them. This is not necessarily where they would be. I mean, some of the field signs might be really high, and so this is why the size of the type is really large. I'm just going to move on to the other version of this so you can see the second option, which is also referencing the design of the original, but in a different way. So we're using the dark gray, and we're also bringing in the color of Edina in an interesting way, so that one of the posts has kind of a tip of green, and it's kind of, especially for your meandering parks, I would say, it sort of calls attention to itself, and it might be easy then for people to identify. Again, this is applied as a welcome sign, but we are open to your suggestion about how we actually do that, where we do it, if we do it, and how many times. You know, maybe there are those places where we might have 3 welcome signs in the entire system when we really start to look at it. But here are examples of what the adoption sign would look like, what the no parking, and what the big dog park would look like. And the materials for this are steel, powder-coated steel, and the substrate for the trail sign is also. I will admit that mounting this above the fence almost gives kids a target. So, I mean, placement will be everything at some point here.
Don't use the fence? Okay, above the fence.
These are the City of Edina colors, and we have extended the palette just so we had more colors to work with. One of the things that's really important when you get outside is, you know, what's going to age well. Anything with red in it doesn't. Anything that's warm, in a warm color area. Powder coating is a really durable approach to signage manufacture and fabrication. And most of the we're going to defer to the signage partner on their recommendations with regard to materials and the actual fabrication methods. Typically, signage companies will want to actually generate their own documentation and shop drawings. So what we're going to be doing is providing sizes, recommendations on materials, or comparable, and allow our partners to start to figure out what's the most efficient way to go about this, and also how to mount them. So that's the other piece of this, is that each one of these signs will have a foundation, you know, poured concrete. You know, we're going to be sinking, you know, these things into the ground somewhere, and we want to make sure that we create a clear zone so that when mowing happens, for example, that these signs are not damaged, and also there isn't grass or any kind of plant material that's growing a little too close to the posts. So those will be some of our kind of next considerations. I'd like to just go back to these styles, though, for a minute and get your feedback and see what you think.
Are we voting on anything or making
Recommendations is all you're asking for, right?
Yeah, we're just
Input and recommendations.
yep. We're just asking for feedback to help us narrow down the selection. And again, not specifics, like we're not to the point of the number of signs, locations. So this is the option 1 that Terry has on the screen right now. You know, this option looks a lot more like the main monument signs, whereas the option 2 is a little bit different look. So I think if you like a sign that looks more like our main entrance signs, or if you feel like maybe we should have something that looks just a little bit different, but still is using the same colors, materials, kind of that branding, that's the feedback we'd like to get from you tonight.
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I like the option 2 specifically because I feel like a lot of these signs that you're looking at are replacing, you know, pick up after your dog, don't park, no smoking, those types of things. And so the pop of color, I think, will draw attention to them, and actually maybe it'll deter or let people know what behavior is, you know, what they're supposed to be doing. I appreciate the consistency of the option 1 and looking and feeling like what we already have. But the reason why I would say the option 2 piece to me is it's the color piece on the post that just kind of it denotes, you know, hey, there's some information that you may or may not want to just read through as you're going through it. Especially too, if we do end up doing something where the URL is included, then it'll automatically draw people's eyes and attention, and you know, give them some information. So that's why I liked it. The only caveat to that is the durability of the material. I think, you know, we want to have stuff that lasts for a long time. So
I give my opinion enough, so I was going to add just two things. One is, and this is so silly, but on the, can you go back one page? Either way, is it, instead of being like a flag, is it better to have those centered, or is it better to have them like a flag in terms of the placement on the pole? Doesn't, I didn't know if that was like brand, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I didn't know if that was like is that where trend is, or?
Well, no, it was a design decision.
Just design, okay.
You know, it was, rather than posting on, I mean, a lot of aluminum post signs are done that way. And frankly, I mean, especially like for standard off the shelf, no parking and those kinds of things, which we decided we were going to allow all of those to be a part of the signage system. The red and white no parking, for example, on streets is the norm, and those are all posted centered.
Yeah.
And so this was intentionally done differently to differentiate from those.
Okay. My second question was more of, from a budgeting perspective, a longer term. I know the adoption process of parks, it changes. So, like for example, in my park, we have one of the ugly signs that was probably in there. But how is that process gonna be built into? I know Janet was you that helped me with getting the signs in Todd Park, but how is that gonna be? I guess I'm just make sure that we have that allotment so that if we've spent all this money and then all of a sudden we have new people who adopt the park, that now we're not like scrambling to try to make a cheap sign, because that's what happens, and that's why we get ugly signs in the end, is we run out of money and we have to make a sign. So I just want to make sure we have that someplace.
Should I answer? Or? I think, I mean, we're planning on creating a sign that's easily changed, that would last a minimum of a year. So the parameters that we identified for this sign is to be able to change it, number one, and you have a durability of a 1 year commitment. So it sounds like there are some that commit to longer periods of time, and so we want to make sure that it really lasts for longer periods of time, if necessary, but a minimum of a year. So that would be built into, I'd say, the next round of details when we're talking to the signage vendor to say, you know, how do we best do that? We've toyed with some ideas about vinyl. Some of that is very, very durable. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is with sliding in something onto kind of a sleeve kind of a concept, bolting it directly to the sign so that it's a little more difficult to remove. So we haven't sorted out all the details of that yet, but that is absolutely going to be a requirement for the adoption signs.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversation about that with the stakeholder meeting.
I agree with Matt's comment on the color. I like the flag design, and I definitely think you need to bolt whatever you're going to slide into the sign. And I'm fine with them being, you know, not being wood. I mean, we can't have wood all of this. It's too expensive. But I like it. And it's fine.
Thank you.
Other comments? I'd like to get feedback from everyone. Brain.
I also like the second sign design, but could you go back to the last slide? Yeah, that one. Would it be possible to put the Edina symbol on the other signs? Is that part of the design process, or I don't know why we have it on just that one adoption sign?
Well, you know, yeah, are you talking about like all the signs in the system, or? I think it becomes kind of less important when we start to use it kind of on everyone, and also the other thing is size. The challenge will be for us to give it the clear space it needs to have. It will end up being quite small to be on some of the signs that are, I'll say, type heavy, when there's a lot of information on it. So we thought that was, you know, since it's literally the only sign in the package that's green and not looking like the rest of it, that was one of the reasons we thought we would like to identify that it's an Edina park, an Edina city logo. So there are, you know, right now we don't have it on a welcome sign. It could be. We originally looked at it that way. And so that's a possibility.
And just one more question. You said the durability of the signs would be about 1 year at minimum. Do you know how long our current wooden signs are lasting typically?
I don't know, and I don't know what was promised by the fabricators. These are, when I say 1 year, it's only for the adoption sign, and it's only for this one portion of the sign. So this is the part that would be removable, is the Edina girls' name. The rest of it is a permanent grade, you know, very durable. And that's really one of the things that we'll be doing, is determining what our durability, I'll say, parameter is. I would like to know, actually. I don't know what the other signs, what was promised by your vendor for that. You know, are they going to last 15 years? Are they going to, you know, be prepared to, you know, replace posts at a certain point? I don't know what those are, but we want to make sure that we're in the same range, obviously.
Right, thank you.
Rick?
I like option 2 also. I just have one question on this page. If the signs are 5 feet high and they're 20 inches wide, what's the weight-bearing component? Not that any people would hang on these signs, but, you know, at 20 inches, you could get your hands on that quick. And
Actually, these are taller than that, and we don't have them dimensioned yet. I'm sorry.
So these are...
This is short.
Okay.
Yeah. So
they need a ladder to get on.
these are meant to be, and they could even be 4 feet, quite honestly. The trail signs can be quite low, and they should be sort of unobtrusive, because we don't want them to be kind of sticking out too much on a trail hike. But the other ones that you're seeing here haven't been scaled yet. Yes, very good point. And, you know, there's the basketball thing. Everybody's going to want to do that. And we usually try to get beyond reach height. But we also have, you know, we have a substrate issue here. We don't want them to be too flimsy in terms of, you know, the material and getting knocked over either. So we'll be balancing those two things and coming up with a recommended height that would be not hangable.
This might be more for Susan, and this might be a comment that we can address at a later time, but jumping off of what Bryn said, and we talked about this because when we started this sign project a couple years ago, but as an example, Edina Girls Fastest Pitch Association, I'm sure, has their own logo. The Football Association has their own logo. Soccer Club has their own logo. We might go to other private sources, not to jump into other folks' lane and their comp or the work plan, but as a funding source, adoption might be part of that. Can we have a conversation with the communications department about being able to use people's logos as opposed to just writing Edina Girls Fast Pitch Association as an example, or I don't know, say Byerly's or someone else that's a local community that wants to be an adoption and use that? Would we be able to use logos on these signs?
So, Matt, we have not had those conversations yet. I think we certainly can have the conversations with our communications team.
But it sounds like, Terry, from what you were saying, that portion of those adopted signs is changeable.
Yes.
And so that's one that at least is open to that conversation and adoption.
Right.
Okay.
Susan, is that something that would have to be approved by the city council?
Yeah, I think it would be a long conversation. Yeah, because it's a philosophical. You know, it's like, what direction would we want to go for that?
Yep. Mike, thoughts?
All right, will be the fly in the ointment. I guess I like option 1 better because it carries over some of the same design element consistencies from our current signage. And I'm wondering, I understand the green pop, the differentiation part to it. Can that part be incorporated into option 1 that has, you know, more of the same designs with the, I guess, the brackets holding things? So can that carried over to option 1? And also, I like option 1. I like the blacker background, whiter, better than the gray. And again, I think it carries some consistency. So if you can create differentiation between just the main sign and the rule signs, but still bring that design consistency through, to me, that would be the best mix.
So I just want to make sure if I heard you correctly. If there's a way to incorporate green in the signs that look more like the original monument sign, that would be a preference?
Correct. So
Okay.
if you go to option 2 on
Yeah.
here, so this, this little green topper you have on there, or something else creative that I'm not, that you are, that shows differentiation between just the monument signs and the rule signs, but is more of the design elements with the brackets and the holding and the black background and the white thing, so that it's consistent.
And perhaps it's a splash of green on the sign itself rather than on the posts, right?
Yeah.
Some way that it's
Something that, like I
kind of-
said, she's creative. I'm not going to give her suggestions, but I wouldn't want to go too far away from the design element that we just put in.
Right.
So I think there's probably a way to create some differentiation, but still make it flow with what it is.
Okay, thanks. Pat? Yeah, we don't need to vote on anything, just need to get the recommendations out, so that's good. One. Yeah, from my perspective, I like 2, but much like Matt, I like it for the splash of color, and so I certainly do give some weight to what Mike's saying. If we could find a way to maintain the sameness of what we've done and still add that splash of color, that would be very interesting. I like the idea of the welcome signs, but I do think we need some more thought about where they fit and what would be on those signs. I think that's probably about it from my perspective.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your input. I think that there's really easily a way we can do both things. And, the way that, in particular, the welcome sign is the only one that really replicates the 2-post concept. And the rest of the signs all are 1-post concept. So I think, as long as we keep the bracket, if you agree that that's kind of like an important design detail, does that kind of resonate? And then we can maybe bring color in, and maybe we can make it more stable through, the connections, and we can, and maybe add color to these posts. I mean, these are all powder coated, so we could really literally do, there's like a million options in between these two that we could explore, and we're happy to do that.
Sure. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, next up on our agenda is comprehensive plan review. We don't have much, honestly, to review in this section, but I did want to make a few points. First of all, the comp plan is now owned by the Planning Commission, so our input, formal input, is complete. And now the Planning Commission owns it and moves it forward in their agenda. Our draft was accepted, still not quite exactly what I was hoping to see in the document that you have in the packet, but I did give some insight on some of the things that we had agreed to in some of our last discussions last summer, and noticed on pulling down from the new website that MJ was talking about that those changes had already been incorporated. So the document that you have in your packet is already old and stale. So if you want to go out to that website, you can kind of keep tabs on what the most current version of our chapter is. So it is out on the Better Together site. There was an open house last night that the Planning Commission held, and Rick, thanks for attending that. Rick, Susan, and I were there and spent some time getting some inputs and listening to some of the comments of both other commissions and the community. The Planning Commission will now hold public hearings in April, in May, and then again in November. And the formal comprehensive plan will be approved by the City Council no later than December of this year. So that's kind of the time frame. What else? Oh, the only other thing to note as well is you might see as you've read through this chapter, it includes some of the items, the action items that we had, but the majority of them were actually rolled up in the implementation chapter. So if you want to also download that one, you will see many of the specific action items and recommendations that we had are also captured in that implementation chapter as well. But from this point going forward, you can participate in the public comment period on the Better Together site. You can probably also send an email direct to some members of the Planning Commission, and you can also participate in any of the public hearings that will be coming up the next several months. But nothing else that we need to do as a commission to formally gather inputs ourselves or pass them along. That section, that participation, that effort's finished, closed, and it's now in the hands of the Planning Commission working with the City Council. Any other questions, comments? Is that clear? Okay, thanks for all your help on that. It's been a longer road than I expected, but I think we're getting close. Next up, Park Work Plan Update. Kind of just an open session here. I think at least I can speak for the couple of the work items that I'm on personally. We're still a little bit slow getting in gear and getting moving, but just an open discussion, any updates from anyone on any of their particular items?
For the alternative funding, after our winter hiatus, we will be meeting again in a couple weeks, and we'll be having some outside people come in and join us and talk to us about help that they can bring or perspectives that they have on doing this in other places. We'll be meeting with some people from the Minneapolis People for Parks also to get their perspective on what they've done and what we might be able to glean from successes and failures from them. And then also I'll be talking to the city attorney just about any keep outs or legalities or any issues that we need to be aware of as we move forward.
Good, thanks.
Is part of your guys' conversation going to be, I know this is how we do it, but can we keep an open mind and look at other, not just because it says the status quo and that's how we do it? I mean, is that going to be part of your push to back to them?
I don't think there is any, this is how we do it.
Well, this is how we don't do it.
That's what I mean. I guess, sorry. As an example, the way we do it is we don't do any sort of outside funding. So, I mean, have you been told that there's a chance for open-mindedness from folks here?
We're assuming that.
Got it.
Yeah.
If it was, and it's a good question, I think if it was approved as an item on our work plan, we have to assume that there's an open mind to hear the inputs and insights we'd have and any recommendations. So. Mm-hmm. Any other work plan updates? We do have, Susan, maybe you can confirm, are we still on the City Council work session for the 2nd of April?
Yes.
So that will be coming up before our next meeting. Any thoughts when we look at the work plan? Any thoughts on what we'd like to bring in front of the City Council for that? And Susan, I don't know if you and staff have had some thoughts already. Certainly chime in on that. Thoughts from the commission? What would we like to recommend that we talk about in that meeting?
This is the annual 45 minutes we get with them?
Yes.
Well, if we go first.
Yeah. Or whatever's left before the meeting.
Good question.
If
nothing comes top of mind immediately right now.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to find out from them beforehand if we have this work plan, every work is prioritized by how much staff we're going to put against it, staff session hours and those types of things. I'd be interested to find out what they see as the priorities of the parks are, how that matches up with what our work plan is, and then if there's stuff that kind of bubbles to the top, then we address that, right? So if it's wayfinding signage, then we should be prepared to talk about that. Because again, with 6:15, they have to be in chambers at 7, right?
Yep.
So if we do go at 6:15, we have 45 minutes, a little bit of introduction of what we're talking about and stuff like that, and then some dialogue. So I think it'd be helpful to have a little bit of information from the city council ahead of time, just what is it that we want to do, and then we can speak to it very quickly, as opposed to, this is our work plan, we want to go through each one of these line item by line item.
And I agree with you, we won't have time for that, but Susan, maybe if you could take that as just an action item, see if there's something top of mind for city council that we should prepare and focus on. Otherwise, from the commission, if there are things that rise to the top of this list we're already working on that we want to air some time with city council, please pass it along to me and to Susan, and we'll craft something for us to make sure we've got on the agenda. April 2nd, yes. So yeah, it'll be before our next meeting. Okay, next up, chair and commission member comments.
Can I ask a question? Real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's really around, and I will be quick, around the initiative 3. It seems very similar to the stuff we just talked to at length on the signs. Can you help me understand where we're talking about this is different than the signs we just spoke about?
Hang on, I don't have a copy of the work plan.
Sorry, it says here that we're going to have a cross-functional committee to draft a plan for some
That's
wayfinding.
on the grand rounds, so that's more of the broader path all the way around Edina, which would then,
versus just the signs.
right,
Okay.
which
I saw the
would then
wayfinding,
also
and I was
include
like,
wayfinding.
Okay.
Yep.
I would have just seen. I would think it would have been interesting if we could have had a little bit more collaboration with the stakeholders to include some people on that committee. Because if the wayfinding, we just had a sign committee, and then we're gonna have this committee, and then we're gonna do another one on wayfinding. It feels like there's an integration that should be taking place.
No, I think it's a good catch, Corin, that we should probably think about as we finish this the last discussion we just had, how that might apply to something with the grand rounds again, because I don't think we'd want to come up with a whole different set of signs for that.
Exactly, or at least just including some of the people in this group in that stakeholder meeting besides just the staff.
Yep. Any other comments?
Just one question on the work plan items that are new. There's names down there, but who is supposed to be taking initiative for the plans? Because I know my name's on some, and I haven't heard anything on anything on it, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing something or not doing something.
If your name is on it, feel free to take initiative. Reach out to other commission members. What I asked the last meeting was that when everyone gathers for the first time, that one of your first items would be to elect a chair within your work team. So then we know I own it, I'll do the report outs each month.
Okay.
Okay. That's right, you're talking about the one. Others? I have just a couple that I'll offer up here. One was just to note that since our last meeting, at least from a perspective of Edina athletics, we did have a couple hockey state championships, so that was fun to see. Both the girls and the boys had a very nice tournament and brought home first place for the city of Edina and the school system, so I think that congratulations to them. Second, too bad Tom's not here today. I saw he was anointed with the wonderful title of Assistant Weed Inspector. So he's got some big shoes to fill, but congratulations to Tom on that. And then the Fred Richards Playground. We saw it on MJ's presentation. That's something, I don't know if everyone on the commission was aware of that, but that item came up to the city council and they decided to dedicate some funding to it. So I think that's one that we'll have to kind of gather around and have a better understanding on it and exactly what's happening and where that's going.
Maybe that's a topic for April.
Could be. That's one we could certainly put on our list as a possibility. Okay. With that, Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
I just have a couple updates. So we had a really successful outdoor rink season, mainly because it was so long, because of the weather that cooperated. But we had 24,694 skaters this year, which is about 2,400 more than what we've had in years past. So we've had a lot of people using the rinks. Pamela and Countryside were the most popular rinks. So. We are full swing into hiring for all of our summer seasonal positions. We are hiring for maintenance positions, all of our playground programs, tennis instructors, and lifeguards. So if you know of any great kids that are looking for summer employment, we'd love to have them work for the city. Braemar Golf Course. Hopefully everyone received their save the date for the grand opening. You'll be hearing more about a week-long, some grand opening activities and events that our golf course staff are planning. So,
Susan, I just had a question. So that was for the 15th, and then I saw today that there was a post about the course opens on the 17th. Is that the 15th? Is that what? That's that Wednesday? That's for the invitation that we received. Is that right?
correct, yeah, yep. And just the last update, and many of you who use Braemar Field and the Sports Dome in the winter months may have noticed that some days it was a little cool. We're aware. We have had some issues, and Chad has been working with several contractors trying to troubleshoot what the problems were, and we think we've identified the issue. We're hoping that we can get it resolved yet this year, so we don't have to then take care of it when the dome goes back up in the fall. But it was the issue is a computer controlling system. And when staff put it in manual mode, it worked fine. And we were able to heat the temps and everything worked as it was designed to. But when we had it set in a automatic mode, for whatever reason, it wasn't working. So some mornings, the dome temp was about 15 degrees. So I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware. We are aware, and we're doing everything we can. We're hoping we don't have to replace that entire system, and that we can. The issue is finding the software designer who designed that program and getting them to come out and readjust. So anyway, we're aware of it, and we'll get it taken care of.
So that was a question that I'd gotten from a few residents, and I guess the common thought is that the dome is heated to 20 degrees above the current air temperature. Is that true? And or when you look at domes in the neighboring communities that have gone up, so there's been one that went up at Holy Angels, there's been there's one out in Minnetonka, all of the neighboring communities seem to have some sort of it, but we'll use the Holy Angels as an example since it just started this fall. It's fully heated. It's 65, 70 degrees in there when kids are playing, so they don't have the walking track in there, but I'm just wondering, did we consciously make a decision to not heat the dome, which I don't think it is the case, and do we have an opportunity to change that policy to do something so that it isn't 15 degrees when kids go in there for the first time in the morning?
Well, the reason that it was 15 degrees is because the unit's not functioning properly. We're designed to heat 40 degrees warmer than the outside temperature, and the equipment that we have should get us that. We should be able to have a temperature inside the dome that's 40 degrees warmer than the outside temps. We're never going to be as warm as some of the other domes because of when we made that decision for efficiencies when we built the dome.
Okay, thank you, Susan. So again, just make sure you've got April 2nd on your calendar before our meeting April 9th. And in closing, I did also see with the hockey championships, I think that was the 7th championship for the school this year. So whether it's been skating, skiing, swimming, tennis, a very good, successful year for the Edina School. So congrats to all those teams. And with that, I'll take a motion to close. Second, all in favor? We're adjourned.
borrow your pen? Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yes, getting back from Mexico?